Hey, why'd you click this? We literally just told you not to. It's right there, in the title. Do you always blatantly disregard instructions? Why do people do things they aren't supposed to do? Let's explore this idea to find out why you clicked a video you weren't supposed to, or how people can manipulate your desire to rebel. For a few years now, you've wanted a tattoo, and you've been saving up the cash to get the ink of your dreams. The tattoo in question, an inspirational quote across the bicep, "Never don't give up." When you explain all this to your friends, they seem less than enthused. They tell you you'll look like an idiot if you get a tattoo like that, and you don't much appreciate their tone. Every time someone laughs, you want that tattoo more and more just to spite them. Every time someone tells you that "never don't give up" isn't grammatically correct or that you should get something a little less vague and generic, you become just a little bit surer that you need that tattoo in your life. Even when the tattoo artist frowns at your reference picture and says, "Really? I know I'm getting paid, but this doesn't look like a good idea." It strengthens your steely sense of resolve. An hour later, you're sporting a permanent reminder of just how much you hate it when people try to discourage you. Congrats. But it's worth asking, why is this a thing? Not embarrassing tattoos, we can chalk that up to a lack of foresight. But why, against all apparent logic, does being told no make us want to do something even more? Whether it's getting ill-advised tattoos or watching videos you're not supposed to. Turns out this isn't just spite. There are specific psychological mechanisms behind the desire to taste the forbidden fruit. Today we're going to discuss the scientific reasons people hate the word no, why some people might react more extremely than others, and ways our mental hardwiring in this area can be manipulated by others to gain control over our minds. After all, of course we wanted you to click the video. You think we wanted to miss out on all that sweet ad revenue? Come on. The main concept we're discussing today is known as reactance, coined by motivation psychologist Jack W. Brehm in his 1966 paper, A Theory of Psychological Reactance. In a series of behavioral experiments, Brehm discovered an interesting phenomenon. Whenever a particular option was seemingly prohibited or removed from the equation, his subjects would become more interested in selecting said option. After several more rounds of study, Brehm had developed a theory as to why this was happening. In any given decision, people have a certain amount of psychological freedom with regard to how they can approach that decision. Back to our tattoo, for example. You have the binary decision to either get it or not get it. But crucially, that decision is yours. When your naysaying friends tell you that getting this tattoo is a terrible idea and that you shouldn't do it, they're sweeping one of your two options, in this case the get it option, off the table. As a result, the only option you have left is to not get the tattoo. While this is in fact the sensible decision, you lost your freedom to make the decision yourself. And that's when reactance kicks in. According to Brehm's research, when external elements threaten to reduce an individual's freedom to choose, the individual is motivated to regain said freedom by jumping to the opposite extreme. It was never about the ugly tattoo. It was about the principle of being able to choose for yourself whether or not to get the ugly tattoo. The second someone attempts to close the door on one of the two binary options, Brehm argues it's literally human nature to want to pry that door open and walk through it. Results of later experiments have vindicated Jack W. Brehm's initial findings, but with some interesting variations. Another two psychologists, Sharon Brehm and Marcia Weinraub, performed a study entitled Physical Barriers and Psychological Reactance, 2-year-olds' responses to threats to freedom 11 years later. The study exposed a number of 2-year-old children separated into boys and girls into 3 different situations. In the first, there was a selection of objects behind a large barrier, with an identical selection of objects standing free from the barrier for easy access. In the second, there was still a large barrier, but the objects behind the barrier were different to the objects that were easy to access. The third option was the exact same as this except for the fact that the barrier was far smaller. The study found that the young boys reacted in accordance with Jack W. Brehm's theory of reactance, showing the most interest in the different objects behind the large barrier. In other words, the objects that were the most forbidden. Interestingly, the young girls showed a greater preference for the unobstructed objects, showing that women are perhaps less susceptible to reactance than men. This also possibly explains why you see fewer women with never don't give up tattoos. Reactance is a theory that explains huge swaths of seemingly anomalous and irrational human behavior. People like being free and therefore dislike things that threaten or reduce their freedom. This can manifest in things as minor as a bad tattoo and things as major as a "don't tread on me" style libertarian resistance to all rules and societal regulations perceived as unnecessary or excessively restrictive on public freedoms. such as the legalization of controlled substances, gun control, and restrictions on marriages. Reactance theory has been a fertile ground for study for almost 6 decades, and papers like Understanding Psychological Reactance, New Developments and Findings from 2015 suggest that there's still plenty of ground left to cover. While it may seem like reactance largely results in making stubborn, pig-headed decisions that can haunt you for the rest of your life, it's also arguably a mechanism for extreme social good, too. Studies have shown that reactance can cause feelings of aggression to the ones attempting to restrict your freedom, which can be annoying when it's getting angry at your parents for making you eat your vegetables, but vital when it comes to opposing fascist dictatorships who want you to shut up and get in line. Reactance is one of the major psychological components behind rebellion, naturally cultivating an extreme sense of hatred and aggression between the oppressed and their oppressors that often boils over into uprising and then positive social change. After all, when someone takes away or reduces your freedom, reactance is the part of you that's willing to fight tooth and nail to get it back, whether that's rebelling against a dictator or adding to a beleaguered tattoo artist's long list of regrets. Of course, an individual's reactions to attempt to reduce their freedoms are subject to a number of delicate factors. Genetics, for example, are said to play a role. If a person has a condition like ADHD, they're more likely to develop splinter conditions like oppositional defiant disorder, which manifests in an extreme sense of defiance toward any kind of order or restriction. The same can be said for the environmental factors of one's upbringing. Take the results of Sharon Brehm and Marcia Weinraub's earlier study, which found men are more susceptible to reactance than women. This is possibly due to the differences in socialization between men and women, particularly in the 60s and 70s, before the widespread adoption of deconstructive gender roles. Men have traditionally socialized to take charge and approach life from a more aggressive mindset, whereas women are typically socialized to take more of a submissive role. Thankfully, this is generally less of an issue these days, but the specter of these traditionally imposed gender roles still lingers in some areas, and research seems to indicate that reactance may be one of them. While psychological theories use broad strokes to determine larger trends, these trends will always be subject to individual variation. Of course, reactance isn't the only all-too-human drive to investigate the forbidden. The other is a powerful force of curiosity. Pretty much no other creature in the animal kingdom exhibits a human level of curiosity. It's this sense of needing to understand that's driven us towards science and innovation in the first place. Even this channel relies on the human instinct to want to learn more and expand your mind. Take this video's title, for example. If you're this far in, it means that when you saw the title, you didn't think, okay, whatever you say. No, you thought, why? Why shouldn't I watch this? What's being hidden from me here? What is it that the people behind the Infographics show don't want me to know? Much like how reactance is a drive toward regaining freedom of choice, curiosity is the drive toward intellectual freedom. Even if a restriction is imposed, curiosity drives the individual to at least want to understand the restriction itself. Like the old phrase, curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. On some level, we're all seeking to have our curiosity satisfied, and the fastest way to send our curiosity into overdrive is someone telling us to stop asking questions. It's the emotional core of all human knowledge, and of every deranged conspiracy theory your aunt has ever shared on Facebook. As we mentioned earlier, though, there's a dark side to curiosity and reactance. After all, once you understand it and are able to recognize it in yourself and others, it can become a valuable asset in the manipulator's toolbox. Welcome to the world of paradoxical intervention, better known by its colloquial name, reverse psychology. If people are strongly motivated to do whatever you tell them not to do because of reactance, it stands only to reason that you can get people to do whatever you want by making them believe it's the one thing you don't want. The pivotal word here is belief, because real people are a little more complicated than Thing 1 and Thing 2 from the Cat in the Hat. It's not as simple as saying, hey, don't give me the security numbers for your bank account. There's always an element of finesse that takes advantage of people's curiosity as well as their sense of reactance. Once again, take this video. The title is Don't Watch This. As we mentioned earlier, of course we want you to watch the video, it's how we make our living. But a title like this not only limits your freedom of choice enough to activate reactance, but it also takes advantage of ambiguity. You, at the very least, want to know why we don't want you to watch the video, tapping into the sense of rebellious curiosity that is the core of all clickbait. And if you're watching this right now, it's some pretty compelling evidence that techniques like this have workable real-life applications. If thinking about this annoys you, reactance can explain that too. When people use reverse psychology on you, you think you're acting out against a reduction of your freedom of choice, when in fact you're making the exact choice that people manipulating you, in this case us, wanted you to. You're feeling a sense of retroactive reactance because you realize that the choice was never actually yours. You were just tricked into thinking it was. It's been used countless times in everything from advertising to war, taking advantage of misdirection to hide the manipulator's true intentions, and making you believe you're rebelling while playing into their hands. Sure, it's a little existentially terrifying to think about how much subtle manipulation is going on in the world around you right now. But now that you know about it, you have the consolation of knowing it'll be a lot easier to spot. So what once seemed like pure spite now makes a heck of a lot more sense, thanks to the right psychological context. Reactance provides a scientific framework for some of our most bizarre decisions, from birth to the grave. So next time someone's telling you that your latest relationship isn't working out, or that new haircut doesn't suit you, or that they really don't feel like you can pull off jean shorts, you'll know exactly why you feel a powerful urge to double down. Still, all this being said, never don't give up is undeniably a really stupid thing to have tattooed on your body forever, and I think we can all agree on that. Now, whatever you do, don't check out What Is She Thinking? The Psychology Behind Facial Expressions, and Weirdest Brain Disorders for more interesting facts about the human mind. Don't subscribe for more fun, fascinating new videos every day, and definitely don't click the bell to turn on the notifications.